Pulsar Studio.
Video games are the youngest artistic medium, and in a very short time, they've achieved an amazing ability to create captivating worlds and experiences. This is Checkpoint, and today, we're going to discover how they do it. While it's not easy to create engaging worlds and experiences, it's not necessary to have a big budget to do it. Instead, it's necessary to have a consistent narrative created from the harmony between gameplay, systems and art, also known as mechanics, dynamics and aesthetics. Published by Devolver Digital in 2012, Hotline Miami is a great example of how to achieve a lot with a little. Jonathan Soderstrom and Dennis Wedding, the game developers, set out to make the player live the experience of fighting the mafia in a violent and psychedelic context set in Miami in 1989. With an arcade design and simple graphics, they just need a few moments to put the player in the shoes of a character with a lot of inspiration in the protagonist of the film Drive by Nicholas Winding Refn. Each creative decision is intended to put the player in that world, in a way that she can feel that she really lived the experience on her own flesh. First are the time and place chosen for the game. The famous drug war took place in Miami during the 70s and 80s, peaking in years 89 and 90. The mafia had in many ways replaced the role of the state, and the leaders of those organizations were practically immune, taking the violent situation to the extreme. It is an ideal context to put the player in the shoes of the gangster killer. The impunity, violence, and presence of the mafia abound in every corner, and danger lurks constantly. The inspiration on the film Drive also fits very well with the experience that it is intended to recreate. Like in the movie, the character the player controls is a mysterious one with no known past or name. This adds to the narrative because while some context and information about a character helps the player identify with it, in such a dark and violent situation, it can create the opposite effect. The music is also an ideal resource to guide the experience and recreate the world. Taking the player to the late 80s, just at the moment of the commercial explosion of popular electronic music and the growth of house, acid house, trance, among other genres which can be appreciated in the game's soundtrack. In a game, there can be a great narrative created with the artistic design, setting, character building and music, but if the gameplay and mechanics don't go along with that narrative, it doesn't matter how well achieved the other aspects are. In order to achieve that experience, it is essential that the mechanics are the right ones to generate the narrative. In Hotline Miami, the genre chosen by the developers to achieve this is beat 'em up / shoot 'em up. In this genre, the main action is to hit and shoot enemies. There are no variables like health or stamina. The premise is to kill or be killed. The gameplay must be simple and smooth. The experience of constant danger and deadly fight with the mafia does not fit with genres like stealth, role-playing or slow action. The controls then need to be simple, using the W, A, S and D keys to move, and the mouse to attack, pick up weapons and throw them too. The spacebar is used to grab down the enemies and execute them, adding a new level to the representation of brutality. A hit or shot received by any enemy means the character's instant death, giving fidelity to the world represented. You can attack with fists, melee or short distance weapons, ranged weapons, and throwing the weapons to knock enemies down. Ranged weapons use non-recoverable ammunition. When a weapon is empty, it can only be thrown. This is intended to make the player use different weapons and find himself picking the ones that are being dropped down in his way while annihilating enemies as it will happen on a real situation. These mechanics help to build the world because they make the players feel they must use whatever it is at their disposal to kill and survive, while creating a state of intensity and constant frenzy like the one they would experience if they would be really fighting mobsters. All enemies carry a weapon and have a field of vision to detect the player, they absolutely all represent a deadly threat. Common enemies die from one hit or shot, but there are also variants that require different ways of killing, increasing variability in gameplay and of course the difficulty and feeling of danger. The art in the game is very simple, given the limited number of pixels available. Still, the color palette and style make a truthful representation of the enemies as members of the mob. The most common enemy is represented by a regular-sized bald guy in a white color suit that may change depending on the scenario. The simplistic style and outfit color are enough to distinguish their role, in addition to fulfilling a role in the gameplay with the intention of making them always locatable by the player. The generic style also meets the function of eliminating any type of empathy and conflict for massacring them, being each one just another soldier in a violent and deadly army. Among the enemies, we can also find Doberman dogs, which upon detecting the player, pounce over him at high speed to tear him down to bites. Their design also manages to represent the danger and aggressiveness of an animal trained to kill using just a few pixels. Lastly, there are the thugs, who are bigger enemies in dark suits, also bold and even more dangerous. They carry no weapon, but they pounce at the player like a Doberman dog to beat him to death. They are immune to any close-range weapon and can only be killed with fire weapons. More than one shot from any weapon weaker than a shotgun is necessary to kill them. These simple combat mechanics and the short variety of enemies not only manages to represent the world and story in a very real and visceral way, but they also build a system that works and keeps the player engaged. While there is no much introduction to the story, the game does feature an arc with beginning, middle and end. This is told in 4 base parts and 1 additional after credits. Each part consists of 4 episodes, each one being a level in the game. This structure is the right amount for the proposed gameplay. The intensity, violence and pace are only sustainable for a limited time. The developers sought to design the structure and length with that in mind, but also considering the story they wanted to tell. Each part is made up by 2 or more sections, which represent a floor of some location and where the objective is to leave no enemy breathing. The game view is top-down. The game could be a side-scroller like many beat-em-ups or shoot-em-ups are, but the experience created by that type of view is not compatible with the experience sought out here. In a side-scroller, the movement on the vertical axis requires other kind of mechanics such as jumping or climbing. Those platform elements are suitable for an experience where the character the player controls has certain special abilities, even superhuman ones. In this game, it's necessary to highlight the characteristics of danger, intensity, brutality, and survival, being a top-down view much more suitable. In a top-down view, there is one more dimension added to the mobility in which the player can navigate each section more freely. The levels look like the layout of a floor. Its design is made in a way that there is a combination between corridors, closed rooms, open areas, and connections between the areas. This design not only faithfully represents a place, but also makes complexity and difficulty emerge, without removing the player the chance of trying to burst in a section and wipe everything out. The character is always in the center of the screen, and there is a limited radius of visibility where it's never possible to see a complete section. In each section, the number of enemies, their location and movement pattern are fixed and predefined. The only random thing are some weapons carried by some enemies or found on the floor. This creates a dynamic of trial and error, in which the player must first advance and explore until her first attempt goes. If the player dies, she can immediately restart the section and try again. The pace and intensity progress upward as the player begins to learn how many enemies there are, where they are, what weapons they carry, and what patterns they follow. The dynamic that emerges is one similar to a puzzle, in which it is necessary to learn every aspect of the levels and execute the movements precisely in order to overcome them. Each beaten part of a section becomes more and more automatic with every attempt. The knowledge and memory of each part accumulates until the complete section is beaten. This upward intensity pace created by the game's loop and dynamic gets amplified by the accompanying art and music. These sections become high-intensity sessions where the music beats sync with the player's actions. The action and intensity progress until reaching a climax at the moment of beating the section and then moving to the next floor, where a short moment of relaxation takes place before starting the cycle over with a harder section in which there are even bosses to defeat who also play a role in the story. The game demands skill, strategy, and precise execution. This adds to putting the player in the shoes of the character and making her feel that she is really breaking into a building full of mobsters and is taking it by assault, and where overcoming each section is a survival achievement. With this narrative created by a series of simple mechanics that fit in the world and story being presented, the right levels of tension and relaxation are achieved throughout each beat of the game. However, the design of the experience and way of putting the player inside the world does not end there. It is also present on the way of facing difficulty and replayability. The game does not feature a player adjustable or selectable difficulty. Being that way, the experience will change and it will not achieve the one sought by the developers. Soderstrom and Wedding decided to use a score system to rate the player's performance on each level, and to use two elements that add to the representation of the world and story. The first element is animal masks with human names that the character must wear for each mission. At the beginning of the game, there is only one mask that does not provide any modifier. It is only aesthetic, with the intention to replace the player's identity with the one of Richard, making her feel that it is he the one who kills and not her. The variety of weapons used, the stealth, speed to beat level, ways of killing enemies, and more affect the score earned by the player on each level. A high score unlocks a new mask with a specific ability. Every mask gives an ability like bigger field of view, lower detectability, faster movement, not being attacked by dogs, and more. But masks with modifiers and abilities are not the only unlockable. Each 50,000 points, a new weapon is unlocked. Weapons and masks help to lower the difficulty on the levels in an indirect way, without making the players feel like they are choosing the easy path. Both elements add variability and ways of living the experience, allowing a bit of personalization to each type of player without leaving the world and narrative. Hotline Miami shows that a video game is a whole artistic production that requires different parts such as aesthetic style, music, programming, narrative, and design. And each part must have a level of work at the height of the others. It is also necessary that all the parts complement each other to give life to the world and experience that it is sought to achieve in the player, making the product truly superior to the sum of the parts. To achieve this, it is essential to have a clear vision with a message, experience, or emotion to transmit, and build everything always with that as a creative guide. And for you, which elements catch you and immerse you in the experience? What makes you live what the game and developers intend you to live? Leave it in the comments below. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Checkpoint. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this to keep discovering the art in making and designing video games. See you next time!